Harold Perkins has talked about setting an official visit to end up taken at LSU. I'm a little skeptical of the Tigers' chances right now.
Let's go to Billy Embody, who had an announcement a couple of weeks back that he was on the move, and he's landed with On3, who is covering college sports and recruiting. And this is a brand that if you're not familiar with, you will be in the next couple of weeks, months, and year, as it is making a big push to corner the market in college football recruiting and basketball recruiting and covering that. As we know in the area, there's a couple of dominant personalities that do that. Billy Embody is one of those. On3 made a great hire in bringing him aboard in covering South Louisiana recruiting and some other stops as well where he's been, places like SMU and Dallas, and covering that market as well. It's good to talk to Bill as always. Good morning, Billy. How are you?
Doing well, Jordy. How about you?
Doing good, man. Tell us about the move to On3. What was it? I know that this is a big brand, and this is something that comes with some experience in the recruiting space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about it. A lot of people know Shannon Terry, who started Rivals, started 24/7 Sports, and did a great job building up both of those. And this is his new venture, and the final one, as he puts it. And it's exciting. I mean, it's a similar model in the sense that you've got message boards, you've got recruiting rankings, you've got coverage of teams and all of that. But also with NIL becoming so big, we have an entire staff dedicated to covering that nationally and where that's going, and building a database of players, and not only ranking them but also evaluating them and assigning a value based on their social media following, where they play their college football or basketball at. We unveiled the NIL 100 this past week, so there's a lot of cutting edge things that they're unveiling over the next year or so and year and a half and beyond. And I just wanted to jump on board and get in on the ground floor. It's exciting, and it's going to be a heck of a time to cover LSU with the way the basketball teams are playing and the new era with Brian Kelly. It's a good time to jump on board. I can say that much.
On3, make sure and give them a follow on Twitter at On3, as Billy Embody is here and will be a regular on this show, just like he always has been, given his knowledge on what the latest is for LSU. Let's start with the basketball front. A huge one on Saturday. Sixth straight class at Will Wade will have 5-star representation as Marvell Allen pledged his commitment to LSU. What do you know about Allen? How big of a commitment is this? And why so much success for LSU basketball in the state of Florida? They have really cleaned up in that market over the last couple of recruiting cycles, Bill. Why so successful for LSU over there?
I think it starts with relationships for Will Wade and Kevin Nickelberry in this case, who led the recruitment on the assistant front. You look back over the years of what they've been able to pull out, Emmett Williams, Darius Days. I'm missing guys, of course, but they've just done a terrific job building relationships. And talking with Marvell probably about 2 weeks ago now about where his recruitment stood and why LSU was right at the top. Just the amount of phone calls Will Wade made to his parents. It kind of reminded me of Cam Thomas in that sense of just how the recruitment went, with how much focus Will Wade and Kevin Nickelberry put on getting Marvell and his family on board to play for LSU, just the constant communication. And one thing I just kind of picked up is just, how strong of a character kid this is in Marvell Allen. He really, really is mature, knows the amount of work it's going to take him from that 5-star point guard status to being an NBA draft pick, which is what obviously all of these guys want to do. And the way LSU's developed guards, I think, has really stood out. But in terms of recruiting Florida, I think it's just a relationship thing. One of Marvell's coaches actually played for Will Wade and Kevin Nickelberry at Clemson, so that played a big role here as well.
Julian Phillips is another guy that they were able to get in this cycle, and it looks like Marvell Allen. I know that there was some discussion. They've had some success in doing this. Justice Williams reclassified for them and got in this past recruiting class. There's some undertones that Allen may be a guy that could be reclassified. Have you heard anything on that front?
I do think Marvell is someone who's going to end up reclassifying, and that just seems like the norm almost in college basketball now. When you see a prospect commit as early as they do, in this case being a quote 2023 prospect, they end up reclassifying to that 2022 class in this case. And the Tigers need an elite point guard to come in. They could have Adam Miller back next year, depending on what he wants to do. He was so highly thought of when he left Illinois, but I'm sure Will Wade will be recruiting him to come back. They'll have Justice Williams back, and they do have Eric Gaines, but they needed somebody like this to really drive the bus. And as far as a scorer, I mean, this is Marvell Allen's game. I mean, he can score, he can pull up and hit the jumper. He's being a better facilitator as of late as well, and that's something that Will Wade in this pick and roll that's becoming more and more prevalent in their offense is what you want to see. So this was a huge addition for LSU, especially next year.
Julian Phillips, his addition to LSU next year as well. Look, Billy, I know that this team right now is in the midst of an SEC playoff or an SEC chase, and really playing well right now, even though they're coming off of a loss. They have a big week ahead. But I'm not sure that people are really realizing or ready for how good they might be next year.
Yeah, they're going to be, once again, very, very good. And that's the thing with Will and how he's been able to build the roster and build the team is, they're picked regularly in that, 5-6 range in the SEC. And each year they've been in the top 3 or won the league or what have you. They always go over the top as far as their expectations from the media, and maybe that there might be a little bit of bias in that sense, but just from where they're picked to where they end up, and I expect them to be just as good as they are this year. Just being honest, I really think the talent they're bringing in, they found the right mix of talent and character. That was the big thing that we heard over the summer was just how hard these guys worked. Somebody like Brandon Murray coming in as a freshman and just pushing guys and really pushing them over the top in terms of, getting more out of Xavier Pinson and some of these older guys that have actually been around. But you have a freshman come in and he's helping build the culture in that sense. And so they've found a lot of these character guys that are, taking this program to the next level.
Billy Embody, who covers recruiting for On3 Recruiting. You can follow him on Twitter at Billy Embody to catch up with the latest. LSU football rounds out their coaching hires with their 10th on-the-field spot. The last guy that'll be wearing the headset is going to be Cortez Hankton, who is a South Louisiana native, a St. Aug alum, New Orleans. He's from New Orleans and has spent the past couple of seasons as the wide receivers coach and passing game coordinator for the University of Georgia. What do you know about Hankton? What does his addition to the football staff mean for Kelly, both on the trail and on the field?
And I think for one, let's start with on the trail. Somebody from New Orleans, St. Aug alum. I mean, we know what Frank Wilson can do and has done, but to add another familiar face for Louisiana coaches, players, all of that, this is big. And it just, again, solidifies, I think, Brian Kelly's credibility in the state. He is a quote-unquote outsider and from, the Midwest and hasn't ventured down to the South to coach college football yet. But here he is pushing the right buttons to get somebody like Cortez Hankton in to round out the staff. And he's done a really good job recruiting at a high level. George Pickens was a 5-star receiver out of Alabama that he got. He went into New Orleans and got Cedric Van Pran and pulled him out. Even after a late push from LSU. And he's done some good things as well. He recruited Major Burns out of New Orleans and has done a good job just overall nurturing those relationships and also being able to recruit nationally as well. There's some really talented prospects in the 2023 class that took notice when Cortez Hankton put up his thank you to Georgia as his departure kind of became official. And so that's kind of something to know on the recruiting trails. I think he's going to be a really strong addition in that sense. And then a lot of Georgia fans, talking to them, are really high on his ability to coach up these receivers.
Yeah.
And, as much grief as Georgia got, and deservedly so, for being so, in the past as far as offense goes, their receivers have done a good job under Cortez Hankton, at least being ready to go and, being able to make plays in an offense that really didn't add much creativity. So he did more with less in that sense, but he's going to have just as much talent at LSU at the wide receiver position. So there's some high expectations with Cortez Hankton jumping on board.
Fred Jackson inside of the chat, hashtag Ask Billy. Billy, who did Brian Kelly keep on the recruiting staff player personnel department for LSU? Do you know how he's rounding that department out? Because as we've seen over the last couple of years, a lot more of the budget has been thrown to that specific part of football operations. What does LSU look like in that department, if you know anything?
Yeah, they have actually kept a few guys, and then they've added some as well. They kept guys like Mason Smith, Will Redmond, and J.R. Belton on the staff. And then they've also added some new names. They've added guys like Mike Ferrara. They've added, there are some others out there, Sherwin Wilson, Jordan Arcimo, guys like that to really step up the, I think, communication that players receive from LSU just overall. That's something that when you look at the staffs, and this isn't as much like a shot at Ogeron, but this is where Brian Kelly might need help, quote unquote, is recruiting and just communication and pushing on that front. And so they've prioritized hiring quite a few new names just to be recruiting specialists, additions to the scouting department, to get out ahead of some of these recruits early on and get after them and let them know that, you know, they're a priority. And I think that's kind of the difference we're seeing right now is the massive analyst staff that LSU had on the field side of things might translate more so to the recruiting side under Brian Kelly. And I think with the way college football is going nowadays with NIL and transfers and all of that, you've got to have guys that know, obviously, how to communicate, how to relate, how to have relationships that not only last through recruitments, but even when they go to college and if they do enter the portal, if somebody has a relationship there, you could reach out when they hit the portal and you know, get out ahead of it and get a visit set and start recruiting them again and pick up where you left off. That's kind of the new age of college football recruiting is, you know, you don't want any bad blood between yourself if somebody goes somewhere else to play college football, because a year later they might be in the portal or sooner in some cases. So you want those relationships to be strong. I think that's where they're building out the staff really, really well. That's been a big priority, and they got a lot of those hires done in the last week or so.
A couple of players, Billy, where do they stand going into signing day in a couple of weeks? Let's start with Jacoby Matthews. What's the latest on the 5-star safety from Ponchatoula?
He just said his last official visit to take, and that's going to be LSU, and I love where the Tigers sit for Jacoby Matthews. I think Alabama, Florida, and LSU are the names you're going to hear the most as of, you know, at least from what I heard in the past week or so. I think those are the three that are going to battle it out, probably a little bit more so an LSU-Florida battle. I like where LSU stands, and at this stage, I think the Tigers are the team to beat.
Harold Perkins.
Harold Perkins has talked about setting an official visit to end up, you know, taken at LSU. I'm a little skeptical of the Tigers' chances right now, just because he is fresh off that A&M commitment. You know, I think we all know what the NIL opportunities that are being floated around are with just a lot of the Texas A&M class, and that being a priority for them. And I think LSU's coming along on that front, as we know, and you had Gordon McKernan on, and he dished on that. But, you know, I think LSU is if they get him on campus, they're obviously going to roll out the red carpet. He's somebody with Louisiana ties, position of need as a 5-star linebacker. I think there's a chance, you know, LSU could, you know, change things and you know, give him, you know, something to think about where he changes his mind. But right now I would just be cautious on having too much, you know, optimism on getting Harold Perkins, but they're going to hope that he can land on campus for an official visit at the very least.
Danny Lewis, tight end out of Westgate, who had a really good senior season, who just picked up the offer in the last couple of weeks.
He did have a really good senior season, capped it with his MVP performance in the state championship, and I think LSU is going to host him here very soon for an official visit, and I really like where LSU stands. Mike Denbrock was his recruiter at Cincinnati and knows what he can do and the offense that he was recruiting him for on that front. So I think things are lining up for LSU to land another West State kid, and that would help just because next year, 2023, they've got a 5-star safety in Derek Williams. That's going to be a huge priority for the staff as well.
One more on a high school, and then we'll get to some of these transfer portal guys. Trevante Citizen, running back out of Southwest Louisiana in Lake Charles.
Trevante Citizen is an interesting one, but I think LSU is going to be able to chip away at this one and find a way to keep him at home. I think even though we're transitioning from the Ed Ogeron era where we're so used to all these guys staying home in Louisiana, for the most part, to the Brian Kelly era where we don't know what that's going to look like. I think LSU just has a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to change things. And Miami and Florida are going to be right in the thick of it for Trevante Citizen. They've got official visits set. LSU can host him again as well, so maybe they fit him in at some point. But I just think Frank Wilson and this staff that they've had, some of these guys that have been recruiting him for a minute, they're going to be able to find a way. I mean, Miami and Florida, that's a long way from home, and sometimes these guys just end up staying in Louisiana, and I think Trevante Citizen could be one of them.
What have you made on how they've cleaned up in the transfer portal? Have they cleaned up in the transfer portal? How good are these players that they're getting in the portal?
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job, and here's why. You can get, like we saw with West Weeks over the weekend, a Virginia linebacker who played a lot as a true freshman, does have an injury that he's recovering from. He's going to be ready to go for spring ball, though, but he's got 4 years, and he's got that amount of time to play and contribute, and he's shown he can do that at a Power 5 level. Then you get guys like Joe Fouché, 1 year left, or Greg Brooks, who's only has a couple years left that can contribute, but you're not having to reach on a high school prospect who might tie you down for 4 to 5 years, so to speak, if they really like going to school at LSU. And that's kind of the good thing about the portal is if you have needs, and LSU has plenty, they can go out and find players that they can address those needs with right away, and they might not be tied down to them for those 4 to 5 years. Then you look at Kyron Lacey, multiple years left. He's a really, really talented prospect. Noah Kane, 2 years left as a running back, and he's had some injury issues, but he's also doesn't have a lot of wear and tear. And he's a Baton Rouge kid who's coming home to play for LSU, and I think he's got the talent to contribute at the running back room, which we saw where that can go south pretty quickly with injuries and depth. And so they needed to add another player there, and they did that in Noah Kane. And just overall, I think they've done a really good job addressing needs so far with the transfer portal. I don't think they're done. And that's the thing that is kind of fun to follow about the portal is it is truly a year-round thing that you're monitoring, whether it's guys entering or guys taking visits, or maybe right before, fall camp, somebody entering the portal, hearing that they're, not going to see playing time or be in the right spot and they need a fresh start, and a school scoops somebody up that ends up being a difference maker. And that's the type of things that can happen from time to time. And LSU fans are going to have to keep an eye on it, especially this offseason, just because they do have a lot of spots to work with on that front.
You kind of touched on what I was going to ask you next, but you mentioned how many spots they have left in the transfer portal. And when you look at LSU players' social media, every time somebody pops, they're like, LSU's not even close to done yet. Do you know or have an idea of who's left that LSU may be targeting that's still in the portal?
Yeah, so right now I have them at 21 overall guys committed or signed. So they have 14. They have what's the math there? 11 spots left. Sorry, guys. Not a big math guy. Yeah. So they have 11 spots left, and the top targets, I think, one, Mekhi Wingo, the Missouri defensive lineman who played for assistant coach Robert Steeples at DeSmit there in St. Louis. That's the top target. He's just wrapping up an official visit to USC. He's probably the biggest one that's out there right now, just that we know of. And then Tremont Shorts, East Tennessee State offensive lineman. who's on an official visit as well. He's somebody that they're pushing for, and had some other Power 5 opportunities as far as visits go. We'll see. I think LSU sits in the driver's seat for him as well. Those are the two big names just right now off the top of my head that I'm really monitoring down the stretch here. And I think LSU sits in the driver's seat for both of those players, and both of them would come in and probably be day one starters, quite honestly. And Mekhi Wingo is kind of the complete opposite of Tremont Shorts. Tremont Shorts has 1 year left. He's a big 6'5", 335-pounder. But Mekhi Wingo has 4 years to play 3, and he was an all-SEC freshman at Missouri this year, which is, that's a good start. Those are guys that you want in your program. Get them in, develop them, and finish out their careers the right way.
You just said there's guys that you want on your team, and it seems like Brian Kelly has done a good bit of housekeeping with LSU football, whether it be you see Dwight McGlothern in the transfer portal, you saw Trey Palmer hit the transfer portal. Is there a little bit of him kind of resetting the culture, it feels like, whether it be through the transfer portal or just kind of cleaning house on the LSU end and what he wants to build there and kind of getting some of the old regime out?
Yeah, I think that is a big part of it, quite honestly. And LSU is seeing some of these guys enter the portal, and it makes a lot of sense. I think some of these guys, you guys follow it just like I do day to day. You hear this or that or whatever, and I think a lot of these guys that you have heard this or that about are entering the portal and looking for fresh starts. Some don't make sense. I think Dwight McGlothern is somebody from the outside that a lot of people were surprised by, but that one he was suspended for the bowl game, and so he looked for a new fresh start. Trey Palmer didn't get off on the right foot with Brian Kelly, looking for a new place to go. And I think that's just where you're seeing complete opposites hit and collide in terms of the culture that was in place and what Brian Kelly's going to look to build. But on the other hand, I talked with BJ Ojulari last week, you guys know, and he was just, very complimentary of the new strength staff and what they're going to do. And he's excited to be, one of the leaders on this team. And there's going to be guys like that you lean on throughout this entire process to be, that cornerstone of a rebuild, quite honestly. And in the transfer portal, you've got to do your research on these players and find ones that fit your culture very well and that are also going to be competitive and motivated. And I think that's one thing with the portal guys that they brought in so far, especially you look at the secondary, Mekhi Garner, Joe Boucher, Greg Brooks, all got to be highly motivated. In the last two, Boucher and Brooks, they're Louisiana natives, getting a chance to play for LSU and finish out their careers. Mekhi Garner, he's played a lot down the road at UL, now comes over for his final 2 years. This is his audition for the NFL, as he put it to me. He worked out with Damone Clark and saw what he did over the summer going into this Butkus Award finalist season. And he said, that's what I want to be a part of. That's the work ethic that I want to put in and make my own, name in the NFL draft circles and step up and, also being able to play in Tiger Stadium and be a part of the changing culture. So it's going to be a hard, long process for Brian Kelly, but he's done it and he's been able to do it at multiple stops. And he's also been able, if things maybe hit a roadblock, like at Notre Dame, they didn't have one of their better seasons and he made some changes and, they ripped off a few 10-win seasons in a row. So LSU has somebody that's very experienced building a program, and that's really important when you look at all this.
Billy, last one. We'll get you out of here. Appreciate your time. Follow Billy Embody on Twitter at Billy Embody. The staff is now final. Cortez Hankton is in. He's the wide receivers coach, which rounds out the 10. What do you make of this staff, the first one that Kelly will go to war with?
I was at the coaches convention in San Antonio and got a chance to catch up with some of them, and also got a chance to catch up with coaches around the country that, actually made a big deal out of what Brian Kelly's put together. And, whether it's recruiters and guys that have really been known doing that, or really solid position coaches or coordinators and just consistently good coaches, that's what Brian Kelly seems to have put together. And I think that allows for a lot of stability. And in turn, when you come to a place like LSU, as we've seen with the last 3 head coaches here, you have a chance to do something special. And I do think that at some point we'll probably see Brian Kelly be able to lift the national championship trophy. That's what history suggests. the staff he's put together is a strong one. You have some of the, honestly great young coaches and assistant coaches in college football with, Jamar Kane and Joe Sloan and some of the Cortez Hankton and probably Robert Steeples too. And then you have some veterans and Mike Denbrock and Brian Polian and Matt House and Brad Davis. We all saw what he can bring to the table. And Kerry Cooks has been around for quite some time. So I think it's a great mix of young and old and recruiting and coaching. And it really came together really nice.
Billy Embody over at On3 Recruiting. Follow him there at Billy Embody. Same great information, just at a new place. He will be here routinely on the Jordy Culotta Show. Great to talk to you, Bill. We'll talk soon.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Always. There's Billy Embody checking in this morning here, a part of the Jordy Culotta Show, driven and powered by Go Chevrolet.